Alyona, Anton thought, I've told you that countless times. If there's something about me you don't like, then maybe it's better for us to part. You know where the door is. Although it was offensive to hear it, for 3 years Alyona got used to this phrase. Antosh, how many times? She replied. You know that I love you. I'm just trying to explain what's happening to me. Learn to control your urges. You're not an animal. He snapped indignantly. Alina and Anton had been living together for 3 years, but were not married. They had plans to tie themselves with the bonds of marriage, but for some reason they kept postponing it. The idea of marriage eventually began to fade for both of them. She began to doubt that her once beloved Anton was really the hero of her story. Meanwhile, he seemed to be constantly finding new flaws in her. Alina, already late in the evening, decided to show the new underwear to her boyfriend in the hope of arousing passionate desire. However, it didn't happen. Again. Anton had his own priorities. He had sex only when he wanted to, and if the initiator was Alyona, he made excuses to avoid it. To Alyona, this behavior seemed strange. How could it be? 2 young people live under the same roof, share the same bed, and intimate moments happen only once a week, or even less often. She just wanted more, but Anton refused to recognize her desires. At such moments, she began to doubt her own attractiveness, and that he really wanted her. Anton was a little strange in general. His moods changed dramatically, and it was difficult to predict how he would behave. Unfortunately, this was always reflected in Alina's mood. She tried many times to convince herself that it was nothing, but she always failed. When she came home from work depressed, she ended up feeling even worse. He didn't seem to be doing anything serious, but he would nag her about little things. She didn't make the bed, she didn't finish boiling the kettle. There were stains on the glasses, the plates weren't arranged properly. These little things annoyed her to no end. Today Anton came home in high spirits, bringing with him a sense of excitement. Alina rejoiced, deciding that this was a great opportunity to demonstrate her recent acquisition and at the same time to please her partner. However, his reaction was far from what she expected. After learning the cost of the lingerie, he became indignant. Are you out of your mind? Spending so much money on 3 threads and a piece of fabric, he exclaimed indignantly. Strangely enough, the underwear turned out to be not so expensive, considering the brand. Alyona managed to buy it at a 70% discount. However, Anton still argued that it was too expensive. Alyona regretted not keeping silent or even lying to avoid this spat. Anton, I wanted to please not only myself, but also you. Why are you getting mad? Besides, I bought it with my own money, she tried to explain. And now you're accusing me of not giving you money, he replied. Nonsense. I never said such a thing. Why are you twisting my words again? Can't you just calm down? She muttered, hoping to defuse the situation. There's nothing to look at. You'd be better off spending that money on a gym membership and working on your physique, said Anton annoyingly. I have a great figure. I'm completely happy with the way I look, replied Alyona, once again feeling insulted. Well, yes, a great one. No curves, just bones. Maybe some people like it, but I've been telling you for a long time that it's time to start exercising. Anton continued, oblivious to her feelings. And by the way, a saleswoman at the store said she would like to look like me, Alina added defensively. With these words, the romantic atmosphere disappeared, and they went back to their banal, petty argument. She was probably just jealous, since her size is bigger. Anton snapped back. No, she was just a few sizes bigger than me. Anyway, forget it. I don't want to discuss it anymore. Thank you for ruining my mood once again. Alina stretched out disappointedly. And then Anton, as usual, said his usual phrase, if you don't like something, I don't keep you. Unpleasantly struck by the conversation, Alyona decided to retire to another room. She lay down on the sofa and turned on the TV, as sleeping in the living room had recently become a habit. Anton, however, didn't seem to care. They lived in a 3-room apartment which he had inherited from his grandparents. He had invited Alina to live with him when he realized he was in love, he claimed. She didn't quite understand his true intentions, but she didn't refuse, and she had nowhere else to go. It was possible to rent an apartment, but with her small salary, it was not easy. Living with him was convenient, at least when Anton was in a good mood. At first, his outbursts of anger surprised and upset her, but in time she got used to them. 2 different versions of his personality seemed to coexist in her. One was loving and affectionate, though not often, and the other was hurtful and unpleasant, often losing his temper. The first would occasionally bring her flowers, compliment her, and buy her gifts, though rarely. The second often ridiculed, insulted, criticized, and nagged. For 3 years she had developed an immunity to these swings, but she still tried not to take offense. At night, she fell asleep with the TV on, thinking back to a time 4 years ago. It seemed like time had passed, but she couldn't forget that fight. Since then, they had gotten married, and Alina had given birth to a beautiful daughter to her favorite tyrant. However, not much had changed, at least not as much as she had hoped. Sometimes she believed that he loved her and was trying to change himself to meet her expectations. Sometimes she thought he couldn't stand her, but for reasons unknown to her, he stayed. With the arrival of their child, the situation changed briefly, but not for long. At first, Anton was indifferent to their baby girl until he realized how important it was to have children in his life. The screaming at night, the financial demands, the need to change his life and habits took the young father by surprise. Well, maybe not so young anymore, because he was already 35. Not an old man, of course, but not a young man either. Alina had to endure countless remarks about the extra pounds and stretch marks after childbirth. She tolerated it, because now she was completely dependent on her husband. One day, when she thought things couldn't get any worse, her husband came home intoxicated and wearing pink sweatpants that clearly weren't his. They were undoubtedly women's. "What does that mean?" she asked, full of unhappiness, looking him straight in the eye. "What do you mean? I had a drink after work. I have a right to it." The man defended himself. "Anton, whose pants are these?" He seemed to have just realized what the matter was. He lowered his eyes and smiled stupidly. "Oh, I messed up." He laughed mockingly. "Anton, whose pants are these?" "Are you going to answer me?" she demanded. "Well, you are not stupid. You'll figure it out yourself," he replied. "Do you have another woman?" she asked. "So, are you surprised? Could you really think I'd be faithful to you forever?" "That's not going to happen, baby. You need to learn to be better in bed first," he grinned. "I'm the one who's bad in bed." She couldn't understand why, but continued to argue. "Between the two of us, you're the one who's bad. You're always complaining about headaches, or being tired, or just not wanting to. I've told you 100 times, if you don't like something, I won't hold you back." He defended himself. This time, Alina wasn't going to let her husband down with his nonsense. Their little daughter was in the nursery, playing quietly in her room. It seemed that she had already gotten used to their periodic quarrels and paid no attention to it. Or maybe it was a defense mechanism. Who knows? "You know what, sweetheart? I'm not holding you back. If you don't like something, leave," she exclaimed angrily. Alina had never expected her husband to cheat on her. She thought he was different from many other men, at least in this. How wrong she had been. "Me? Have you forgotten, darling, that this is my apartment? So get out of here if you want to," he threw. "No way. I'm not going anywhere. Or do you think I'm going to take our daughter so you won't deny yourself anything? You can leave her here," he proclaimed. "Really? And what will you do with her?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "I'll take her to her grandparents. They adore Anyuta, and will take care of her." He replied, "That's a very grown-up decision. What an asshole you are," she replied. "And you just realized that now? By the way, where's my hot dinner?" He asked cheekily, "I just got home from work. Feed me." "Let your fool provide for you," said Alyona, crossing her arms. "For your information, this fool is in many ways cooler than you. She earns her own money and takes care of herself, unlike you who depends on a man." "Oh, really? The fact that I'm on maternity leave is none of your business," she shouted. "Isn't it normal to take care of our 2-year-old daughter?" "So what? Some women go back to work after a year and you sit at home and do nothing," replied Anton, walking uncertainly into the kitchen. On the stove was just cooked soup with meatballs, and its aroma made Anton's stomach grumble. He was very hungry. "Oh, soup," said Anton cheerfully. "You know, if you didn't cook, I'd have left you long ago. Which? You lured me with delicious food. That's why I have to stay with you." Without thinking, Alyona grabbed the pot and carried it to the bathroom. She poured all the soup into the toilet and flushed it, then brought the empty pot into the kitchen and put it back on the stove. "Bon appetit," she said defiantly, and got ready to leave. "Ungrateful bitch," Anton shouted. "I sheltered you, married you, bore you a daughter, and you. Bastard." Then, as if he had no strength, he added, "I'm so hungry, and you." Alina was seized with anger. She almost couldn't think at that moment, so she did what first came to her mind. She dressed her daughter, dressed herself, packed her bag, and hailed a cab. Her husband seemed perfectly fine with her leaving and taking their daughter with her. He was more upset about the soup being flushed down the toilet than anything else. He didn't even utter a word to stop her. Alina didn't know where to go, but she knew one place to at least spend the night: her in-laws' house. They were good people. Sometimes she wondered how they had raised such a heartless and inept son. Elvira once said to her daughter-in-law, "Our house is your home. You will always be welcome here." Alyona often complained to Anton's mother when he crossed the line. Her mother-in-law managed to pull herself together and talk some sense into her son, but it didn't last long before the same problems arose again. One evening, Alina came to their house outraged and asked Elvira, "Can we stay at your place tonight?" Her mother-in-law was astonished at such a request, but she did not object, especially since her granddaughter was with them. "Of course, come in. What's the matter?" inquired Elvira. Soon Konstantin Sergeyevich joined them. "What has our son done?" he asked. "I'll tell you, but first I have to put Anyuta to bed," Alyona replied. Elvira Ivanovna knew that their son had his faults, but still did not lose hope that he would grow up and change, although deep down she found it hard to believe it. There was a time when Elvira Ivanovna tearfully begged Alina not to abandon her son. She promised to support them as much as she could. Perhaps it was this promise that had kept Alyona tied up for so long. She felt that he wasn't completely hopeless with such wonderful parents. However, Alina's opinion of Anton had changed a lot over time, but her opinion of his parents remained the same. As soon as their little Anyuta was comfortably settled in front of the TV, father-in-law and Alyona went to the kitchen. There Alyona told in detail about what had happened. Elvira Ivanovna took a deep breath, and Konstantin Sergeyevich's expression changed. Finally, Alyona concluded, "Can we stay at your place today and go to my grandmother's tomorrow? I realize this is inconvenient, and I apologize for intruding so late, but I have nowhere else to go." Hearing this, Elvira Ivanovna gasped again. She realized that after such an incident, Alyona was unlikely to forgive their son. However, she did not want her granddaughter to be taken so far away. She loved little Anyuta very much and came to see her almost every day to be with her, to help and support her daughter-in-law. Alina's parents have died. Her mother lost her battle with cancer, and her father became tragically addicted to alcohol after the death of his wife. The pain of the loss of love pushed him to drunkenness, which eventually led to his death. To divide the property, the parental apartment was sold, and the money was divided among the 3 children. Alina had 2 older sisters, and each of them received relatively small sums, since the cost of apartments in their hometown was not high. Alina decided to invest almost all of her share in her education. As there was no one else to support her financially, although she did not find it particularly useful now, Elvira Ivanovna looked pleadingly at her husband, hoping that he would offer an alternative solution to their problem, but hope was fading. Konstantin Sergeyevich thought for a moment and then spoke. Since he shows no interest in self-improvement, we will have to curb his reckless behavior. Confused, Elvira asked, "What do you mean?" Konstantin explained, "The apartment is still registered in your name. Let's sell it and buy 2 new ones, one for Alyona and her granddaughter, the other for her son. If they are separated, let's at least do it decently." Elvira was taken aback by this suggestion, and Alyona, though pleased with the idea, could not believe that her parents would do such a thing to their own son. "He won't agree," Elvira protested. "We won't ask his consent," Konstantin argued. "He may be registered there, but legally it's our apartment, not his. We won't allow our granddaughter to be taken away to some faraway place." The next morning, Anton received an unwelcome surprise. Still inebriated, he was astonished when his father came unannounced and let him into the apartment using his own keys. Konstantin was far from delighted at the sight that opened up to him. His son was lying on the floor beside the bed, apparently unable to get up. He was still wearing the same disheveled pink pants as the day before, a sight truly unpleasant. "Get up," commanded the father. "Why have you come so early, father?" groaned Anton. "Early? It is already noon." "We need to talk," objected Konstantin. "Shall we wait until evening?" "Get up. I won't repeat myself." Anton struggled to get up from the floor, his back throbbing with pain after a restless night. It felt as if he had been run over several times by a tractor. Konstantin, muttering to himself under his breath, headed for the kitchen. He brewed a cup of strong coffee for his son and set it on the table. The thought of making a cup for himself crossed his mind, but he remembered that the cardiologist had advised against it. Meanwhile, Anton stumbled toward the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face in an attempt to regain consciousness. He didn't seem the least bit bothered by the whereabouts of his wife and daughter. "Well, what's wrong?" he asked his father unhappily. "You know what happened? Do you even know where your wife is?" replied the father. "Oh, so she meant to see you. Did she let you know?" "You fool! Watch your tongue when you talk about your sister-in-law," exclaimed the father indignantly. "I'm talking about mine," objected Anton. "It seems to me that yesterday you forgot you were married," remarked the father. "Well, father, you act as if you had never left your mother's side," replied Anton. "Believe it or not, I haven't. I didn't even think about it." Dad defended himself. "Well, you're just a saint. I wish your son had never been born," replied Anton. "I won't forgive you for this. Moreover, I will punish you," declared the father. "Punish you?" smirked Anton. "And how exactly?" "You won't like it," warned the father. "Oh, I don't doubt that. So what are you up to? Are you going to flog me like you did when I was a little kid?" "Well, I'm not a little kid anymore," objected Anton. "I'm aware of that. I won't take away your privileges, but you're going to have to move out of this apartment," his father declared. "And move where to?" asked Anton, mulling over the options. "Someplace else, not as spacious and comfortable," replied his father. "Father, are you kidding? This apartment is actually mine. Have you forgotten?" reminded Anton. "You forgot that the papers are still in your mother's name. and they belong to your parents," said the father. Konstantin was now relieved that they had never transferred ownership to their son. They had asked him several times to do so, but he had never made up his mind. "Father, are you really going to do this to me because of this woman? Are you out of your mind?" protested Anton. "This woman is the mother of my granddaughter and your wife, and yes, I will do it without hesitation," his father declared. "You can't do that, Dad. I'm registered here. I'm not going anywhere," objected Anton. "And your wife and daughter are also registered here. If I have to, I'll take you to court, but for now, I suggest you do it willingly," his father threatened. "And if I refuse?" Anton questioned. "Then you'll be homeless. We'll sell the apartment anyway, buy a 2-room apartment for Alenka and Anyuta, and use the rest of the money to buy a dacha outside the city. You'll get nothing." "Are you serious?" asked the son, unable to believe what he heard. "Anton, this time you went too far. You got away with a lot of things, but no more." At that moment, Anton was cursing himself for not taking care of the re-registration of the apartment. They could have at least formalized a donation on it. But no. "Mom will not allow." He tried to protest. "Your mom already knows and supports my decision. You're not thinking straight today, and I hate to see you like this. Tomorrow morning you will come to us and voice your decision. As if I have a choice. You have a choice, and I've given it to you. Then you will make your own decision." Having said that, Konstantin got up from his chair and headed for the exit. He left, closing the door behind him and leaving his son in frustrated feelings. Anton took a few sips of coffee, his mind gradually clearing. His father's words were entering his mind more and more. He had not expected such an outcome at all. That Alyonka. What a conniving woman. She was obviously planning to take everything for herself. The next morning Anton went to his parents. They were already waiting for him, and Alyona anxiously thought about the upcoming meeting. She still did not believe that she would be able to get rid of her husband and get ownership of the apartment, but this thought pleased her very much. Shouted Anyuta, stretching out her little arms as he entered the apartment. However, Anton didn't seem to notice this and walked past her. Alyona picked up her daughter in her arms and followed him. "Okay, right. The hell with you," Anton agreed. "But remember, I will never forgive you for this, and we do not need your forgiveness," replied his father. Elvira Ivanovna only looked fearfully at her son, then at her husband, and then at her daughter-in-law with her granddaughter in her arms. She realized that it was the right decision, even if it meant potentially losing her son. Anton moved out of the apartment after receiving a written promise from his father that he would buy him another one. He tried to negotiate a 2-bedroom for himself and a 1-bedroom for his wife, but his parents were adamant. The process was not quick, but eventually they sold the apartment and bought 2 others. All this time Alina and her daughter lived with her parents-in-law. "Is it okay if we transfer ownership to Anyuta instead of you?" asked Konstantin as they prepared to draw up the paperwork. "No, of course not. I understand everything and I'm very grateful to you," replied the other party. At this point, Alyona had already finalized the divorce with their son, which made the parents take precautions. When they handed Anyuta the keys to the new apartment, she was overwhelmed with gratitude, although her son was not happy. "You may consider that I am no longer your son," he exclaimed sharply, snatching the keys to the apartment. This reaction did not take them by surprise, however. They had to make a choice, and they chose their granddaughter. Alina's new apartment was conveniently located in the same neighborhood as Anton's parents. They had deliberately chosen a place closer so that they could keep in constant contact with their granddaughter, and Alyona was glad of this decision. When she finally settled in, she couldn't believe her luck. She had made a promise to herself that if she ever heard a man say, "I don't need you anymore," she would leave him in a heartbeat. Now Alyona fully realized the weight of these words. If a man says so, it means that he does not appreciate his partner and her love. and it is better to keep at a distance. Anton never forgave his parents, never got in touch with them again. Later they learned that he sold the apartment to move in with another woman and remarry. A year later, Alyona met a new love, Michael. They dated for over a year before they decided to get married. It was a little unusual for him to see how his wife valued her in-laws, but soon he got used to it and even sympathized with them because they were really kind people.